Hello, everyone, and welcome to, I guess, what is my second ever official Q&A session. I think I've done a live Q&A session before, but this is my second Q&A session for Substack. And instead of my usual newsletter for this Friday, I decided to do a question and answer session. So this one obviously isn't a live question and answer session, but over the past few months, I've compiled dozens of questions from people who just reach out to me on X or tag me in a post on X. Usually it's X, sometimes other social media platforms, but who just ask me questions on social media. And I try to use that as an opportunity, not only to answer them on social media, but then to compile this list of questions and then do a question and answer like I'm doing today. I feel like, or at least I hope that it can be valuable for some people to hear answers to these questions, which they might also have themselves, related to things that I'm doing in training. A lot of these questions, as you will see, are related to like how I'm training or how I'm fueling my training. Some of them have to do with general health type stuff, supplementation, and some other stuff just has to do with kind of injury prevention or heat training, for instance, as we'll see today. So I think I have about 15 to 20, maybe even a few more than that questions here that I've compiled from X. So I'm going to go through those today and just rattle them off, giving my answers. I really haven't prepared anything for this, but I think that's part of the fun here is reading the questions and sort of just giving you my answer in real time. And I've bucketed these into categories. So just to go through the categories really quick, today what we have on tap is nutrition and supplementation. So there I have ketones, creatine, fueling. Then we have training and workouts. We have injury prevention and recovery, mental performance and adaptation. That could be an interesting one. Heat and environmental training, health and physiology, gear and equipment, and weight management and performance could be another interesting topic there. And then training symptoms. So I'm going to go through these and answer all of them. I think this will be a lot of fun. I'm excited to do this. And if you like this and you don't want to submit questions for a future question and answer session, please do that. I love answering questions, directly, but also through question and answer sessions like this. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So this first bucket of questions, this has to do with ketones. I get a lot of questions about ketones because I actually use them myself. So maybe before I get into the first question here, I will just note that when I talk about ketones and when I use ketones, what I'm referring to is generally ketone IQ. These are an exogenous ketone supplement. Michael Brandt is kind of the main guy at Ketone IQ, awesome guy, real fast marathoner as well. But I've been using Ketone IQ for a long time. There's a lot of research on exogenous ketones for recovery from exercise, as well as maybe some mental and cognitive benefits during exercise or just cognitive benefits in general. And Ketone IQ is 1,3-butanediol, which is a specific type of ketone. So it's not a ketone monoester, but it's 1,3-butanediol. It's a ketone precursor, really. So you drink it, you take the shot, your body metabolizes it into beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is one of the primary ketone bodies that we make. I take what I've been recently actually taking. Well, I'll just get into the questions because I'm going to answer the questions prematurely here if I do that. So and by the way, I am affiliated with Ketone IQ. So, if you ever want to try some, I have a code that you can use to purchase some of that and get a little bit of a discount. But, just a caveat there, or maybe a declaration of interest that I am affiliated with Ketone IQ, but it is because of product. It's a product that I use, trust, and really enjoy. They have all of these awesome new flavors too. This one, raspberry lemonade. I don't even know if you can see that, but they have a green apple one and a peach. My fridge is stocked up with them for this training block. So yeah, they're great. They taste good. Sort of like medicine still, but I think that's kind of the point. So the first question here is, how often do you use exogenous ketones? I noticed some recovery benefits when training heavily for an ultra marathon, but I haven't noticed anything when taking them with lower training volume. So I take them twice a week, and usually I was just taking one shot, but I'm trying something new, this marathon training block, and actually taking 2 shots twice per week. So that's 4 shots per week. Now, they are a bit expensive, lower cost than some of the other ketones, but I do recognize that it can, be a bit expensive, but it is a supplement that I feel like it helps. So when do I take them? So I take them after hard workouts during the week. So typically on any week, I'm doing one hard interval workout and then a long run of say 20 miles or more, which more often than not includes a little bit of race pace or tempo running. So I will take ketones almost immediately after, or at least as soon as after I finish those runs. And again, to promote recovery. So what the recovery benefits that have been kind of shown with them is improved glycogen replenishment. So if you take them with carbs post-workout, improved protein synthesis. So if you take them with your protein, so I guess just a meal after a workout. And then where I really find the benefit is for neuromuscular. Like when I do a hard workout or a long run, sometimes the next day you can feel a little bit foggy or fatigued. And I just think that these help with that recovery. I don't know. I sometimes feel like they do prevent a little bit of the overtraining and overreaching. And there's some pretty good research to support that as well. So twice a week, 2 after a hard workout, 2 after a long run. And yeah, I've been seeing kind of great benefits there. And I feel like you might not notice a benefit if you're taking them with a lower training volume, like this question was referring to. And I don't really even use them during base training phases either. I didn't take them all summer. I really just started taking them during kind of this main marathon training block. The second question, what are your thoughts on exogenous ketones? Why do you take them when and how often? I'm curious if I should invest in them. I sort of also just answered that. My thoughts on them are that, I don't think that they're a miracle supplement. They're a lot more. There are plenty of other things that you can do to improve your performance before you kind of start taking ketones. But, I think at this point in my career, and a lot of people might agree, but like where I'm at with training, I feel like I train well, I sleep well, I eat well. And so I'm trying to kind of push the limits of what little things can I tweak and experiment with to try to improve my performance. And ketones are certainly one of those. And so those are my thoughts on them. That's why I take them. Again, when and how often, I sort of answered that in the previous question. And the final question with ketones, do you use a pre-workout or pre-race supplement? I've heard that David Roche, ultra runner, recently won the Western States race, tout the recovery benefits of exogenous ketones above all. So yes, as I mentioned before, I rarely will take these pre-workout or pre-race. I'll take that before a long run sometimes if it's easier, because I do find that it kind of puts me into a flow state, gives me some of these mental benefits. But for a performance boost, I'm typically just going to be fueling with carbs during a workout instead of ketones. So I really haven't maybe found the optimal pre-race or intro workout scenario with which I want to use these ketones. But after exercise, that's kind of what my main use case for them is. All right, so moving on from ketones to creatine, another popular supplement. The first question here, what are your thoughts on creatine? Do you cycle off creatine usage, or does it not matter? I used it for 7 to 8 months, ran out in December, and decided to take a month off before ordering more. Creatine, I take probably a little more than 5, between 5 and 10 grams of creatine every day. So I'll put a scoop of creatine in like my greens drink in the morning, and then I have like a ton of gummies in my pantry, and so I'll kind of take like maybe a gummy or two at night. So that gives me an additional like 2 to 5 grams of creatine. So I might be closer to like 7.5 to 10 grams of creatine per day. Regarding cycling off, there's no evidence that you need to do that. I think people are sort of misunderstanding creatine a little bit in terms of it's something we get from the diet. Like it's not a supplement, it's not a hormone that our body's going to become desensitized to if you keep taking it. So some supplements you do want to cycle off and on to prevent that, hormone receptor desensitization. But creatine is not that type of compound. And so you can just take it 5 to 10 grams per day indefinitely. And it doesn't really matter. And I think the great thing about creatine too is, in regarding to the latter half of this question, if you forget to take it, or if you run out, or if you're on vacation, how big of a deal it is. Not a big deal at all. I think you can stop for about a week to 2, maybe even more, and your stores will somewhat stay saturated if you've been supplementing for a long time. If you go for more than a month, I would think that you would start to kind of lose out on some of the benefits of supplementation, because your body's creatine stores will decline a little bit. But in general, if you go on a week vacation and you don't want to take your creatine, it doesn't really matter. Just like having an extra serving of meat or something with dinner. I think that's kind of the consensus there. A lot of the creatine experts, of which I am not, by the way. I mean, I talk a lot about it. I've read a lot of the research, highly kind of into this topic, but I'm not a quote unquote expert in creatine in terms of somebody doing the research on it. But yeah, no need to cycle off. I wouldn't take more than a month off of it though. That's probably when you'll start to lose the benefits. Another question about creatine, do you take creatine on non-training days as well? Yes, absolutely. So if you're going to be supplementing with creatine, you take it every single day. It's not an acute supplement. I think another thing that's misunderstood about creatine is that it's like this acute performance enhancer, but that's not really how it works. It works because it saturates your muscle creatine stores. If you take it before your workout, it's not going to actually give you that benefit during your workout. That's not really how creatine works. So yeah, on non-training days, you want to take it just like you would eat protein on non-training days too. So take it every single day. Next question here, doesn't matter when you take your daily dose of creatine. The timing questions about creatine are really interesting because in one sense, it doesn't matter. You can take it whenever you want. Again, because the point of taking it regularly is to saturate your stores. But in regards to optimizing kind of the absorption of it, or perhaps some of its side effects on muscle protein synthesis or glycogen storage, timing does seem to matter a little bit. And in that case, I would recommend take it after your workout with your meal, with your protein shake or whatever, because it does appear to, one, exercise and increasing your insulin sensitivity, increasing blood flow will sort of just enhance creatine uptake into the muscle. And then second, taking it with carbs, taking it with protein, taking it with caffeine might actually enhance some of its effects on glycogen resynthesis, protein synthesis. So whatever you're eating after your workout, just take creatine along with that. I think that timing wise, that would certainly be the best. Next question here. You replied to a thread last week with a list of supplements you take. Can you share that list? I'm considering adding a few. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of about creatine because creatine is one of the supplements that I take daily. But the other supplements that I take every single day, omega-3s, so DHA, EPA. I take creatine. I take vitamin D. I take an iron supplement. It's Ferrosorb, so it contains a few other things, not just iron, but that's from Thorne Supplements. And then I take Tongkat Ali. So this one's kind of a experimental supplement that I take. You know, there's a lot of claims out there about it being a testosterone booster, but I take it kind of for the hormonal support. And I don't know. I don't really know if I've noticed any benefit, but I haven't noticed any downsides with it at all. And something I actually have removed from my supplement stack recently is ashwagandha. So ashwagandha is kind of another one of these herbal supplements. And there's some evidence that it can help maybe with exercise performance, and it's a so-called adaptogen. So the idea is that it will kind of help you respond better to stress and adapt to stress, whether that's like life stress, psychological stress, or physical stress of training. But what I was noticing with it, and I think this is somewhat well known, again, maybe like a little bit anecdotal, but because it's an adaptogen and seems to maybe blunt the stress response or blunt the cortisol response, if you take it for kind of a long time, or maybe if you tend to be prone to maybe feeling a little bit down or not having enough of a cortisol rise maybe at some points of the day, it can lead to like this anhedonia a little bit. And I was kind of feeling that. So when I was taking it, there were just some days, and they were happening more often than I would have liked, but some days where I just kind of like woke up and it was just like impossible to get going. I almost felt a little bit numb or anhedonic. So I stopped taking it. And again, I don't have any like objective data to say whether it's better, but I have noticed a little bit of, you know, those days occurring less frequently. So just kind of an anecdotal experience with ashwagandha there. I think I'm done with it for that reason alone. All right, let's move on to fueling. The first question here, how do you fuel early morning sessions? I find those sessions, as well as long 2-hour plus sessions on the bike, the hardest to fuel. Yeah, so man, I really still, fueling is kind of a constant, I won't say battle, but kind of constant experiment with me. I think with everybody, but you know, for the people who are working out early in the morning, as I do pretty much every day, sometimes days I work out twice a day, so in the afternoon it's not as big of a deal. But if you're waking up in the morning to run, cycle, whatever, even resistance train at 5:30, 6, even 7, it can be really hard to eat something. And I am just very, before, you know, 8 or 9 in the morning, just very averse to eating anything, not for any particular reason. I'm just not hungry at that time of day. So what I find is that the best way for me to fuel those sessions is to kind of start to just take on gels or a carbohydrate drink during exercise, because I don't really want to eat anything beforehand. Maybe I'll sip on like a carbohydrate drink a little bit before if I'm having my morning coffee. But generally, like if I'm working out in the morning, I'm going into the workout fasted, and then I'll typically have something to eat. I say eat, but it's going to be like an energy gel during. And that's really how I fuel those. And if it's a workout, it really depends on the length, the intensity of the workout. But these days I'm kind of going for like maybe 40 to 60 grams of carbs per hour if I'm going to be working out for like 90 minutes to 2 hours. If I'm going out for an hour run, maybe even 80-minute run, I'll probably just do that fasted. I think I have questions about fasted training here that I'll answer later. But for those, they are hard to fuel. And my suggestion there would just be, maybe make energy gels and carb drinks your friend, because if you don't really like to stomach anything in the morning like I don't, that might be your best option there. Next question. Can you give an example of what you eat right after a workout? After swimming and strength training, I'm hungry, but after a run or a bike, I struggle to get something down. Yeah, so same here, especially during the summer, and pretty well known. But if I do a hard run, interval workout, a long run, a hard bike, and it's hot out in particular, I just have no appetite after I finish working out. And I think that kind of goes against what a lot of people think happens. I think there's this almost a misconception that, oh my gosh, a hard run or a long run or a hard bike cycling workout really makes you ravenous and hungry, but I have just not found that to be the case ever. And in fact, it's usually the opposite, especially after a race. I mean, I've done, a few marathons in the past few years, but sometimes I feel like I could go the whole day after that marathon just without eating anything, because your stomach's it just doesn't feel good because you're running hard. There's a lot of, I'm sure some gut trauma going on in there, but you're really just not that hungry. But of course, you got to eat something, you really do. I mean, if you want to recover properly. So for me, what I have sort of leveraged on is finding something. I can't do hearty. So I can't do, say, like bacon and eggs or avocado toast or anything really hearty for breakfast after I'm working out. And so what I really lean on is sort of yogurt, granola, berries, like a bowl like that that's going to be a little bit sweeter. I tend to find that I can get those down pretty easy. Something I also rely on a lot is a smoothie. So like a protein shake, I'll put greens powders in there, some fruit, some protein, some ice, boom. So something cold. But the yogurt and granola lately has been my go-to. I'll have like 1 or 2 Greek yogurts, layer that with, however, probably a couple servings of granola and then some fruit. And I really find that not only is it a great post-workout meal, but it's something that I can actually stomach and have an appetite for until sort of my appetite rebounds a little bit later on in the day. I do find though that after low intensity workouts or strength training, kind of like this person asked, I am somewhat quite hungry. But yeah, after running, cycling, it can sometimes be hard. So I would just say find something sweet, something fruity. That tends to be sort of my go-to. The next question about fueling, I see a bunch of different gel choices. How do you decide on them? Also, why don't you use Morton? So this was just in reference to a post that I put out on how I fuel a long run, I think. I use several different gels during just say one individual run. That is, I think, for a couple of different reasons. One of those being, I guess, just palate fatigue. So if you take the same flavored gel, same consistency over and over again, sometimes you just get sick of it. I don't necessarily find that, but I feel like in terms of preventing it, just cycling through maybe 2 to 3 different gels on a long run is the best way to go. Second, all these different gels actually have different purposes. So I have some gels, some energy gels that have caffeine in them, some that have 40 grams of carbohydrates, some that have 20 grams of carbohydrates, some that are maltodextrin, some that are glucose, some that are sort of like a whole food gel. And so I think using those, you kind of have a different purpose for each gel during the run. And of course, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that's the point of all this, right? Overthinking it. Typically halfway through a long run, if it's 2.5 hours, halfway through, I want to have some caffeine. So then I'm going to have a caffeine gel. At some points in the run, I'll take a gel with 40 grams of carbs. But then say if I only have 20 minutes left in my run and I want to have another energy gel, I'll take something with 20 grams of carbohydrate. So that's kind of my reason for using different gels. And I actually have kind of a sampling of some of the gels that I use. One of my go-tos right now is what's right here. It's a Science and Sport Beta Fuel gel. Try to center that. These are 40 grams of carbohydrates. It's maltodextrin and fructose. And what I like about these is that they have a consistency that's more similar to water. And they're isotonic as well, so you don't need to drink water with them. Some of those gels, like the Morton gels, or if there's a gel that's pretty heavy in electrolytes, you need to wash it down with like a copious amounts of water. These you don't, so I like them. They go down smooth, and I use these all the time. Second, and I actually was sent these for free. Shout out to Marcus Milione on X. He's the founder of this company called Minted. He actually made his own energy gel here. This one has 40 grams of carbs, 50 milligrams of caffeine, and it's unflavored, which some people might find odd, but really it just has like this sweet, fruity taste to it, which is kind of nice. And then the third gel that I've really been liking lately are these BPN Go gels. So this is Nick Bear's company. Nick Bear is an ultra runner here. He lives in Austin. Huge company, BPN, Bear Performance Nutrition. What I like about these, they're less carbs, so it has 25 grams of carbs. So if you want a little bit less or take the gels more often, you can take these. But they're made with real food ingredients. So this one, apple juice concentrate, brown rice syrup, apple puree, purified water, strawberry puree concentrate, lemon juice. So it's real food. It's not like just a glucose or a maltodextrin, but they taste really good. It kind of just tastes like you're having like a fruit snack or something. So I'm using those. I have a couple of different ones that I'll use sometimes. I didn't have any right now, but those are kind of the three gels that I've mainly been using, and I do like them a lot. Why don't I use Morton? I actually do sometimes use it, but they're a little bit expensive. That's not really the reason I don't use them, but if anyone has tried the Morton gels, they'll know you have to chew them. And I don't really like that. Especially, I mean, if I'm on a training run, that's fine if I'm going kind of slow, but during a race, you're running 5-minute miles, 5.5-minute miles, like the energy and the concentration and just the effect of chewing on breathing mechanics, I don't really like it. So that's kind of prevented me from using them. And maybe I'll experiment with them next because I do think that there's some of the better gels out there, but it's the chewing that has sort of made me averse to using them at this point. Last question in this fueling section. How do you see the benefits of fueling, even easy non-workout long runs, show up in your training? What downsides do you see if you don't fuel easy long runs? I take gels for workouts, but have always run fasted for non-workout long runs. Yeah, this one's tough as well. I really have a love-hate relationship with fasted workouts because for the longest time, for most of my career, even now, some days, running fasted sometimes just feels good. I mean, you don't really have to worry about fueling, but I don't know. I feel like I can get by with it. And there's just something about it that kind of feels good. But then on the other hand, I do recognize that I think there's the potential for it to compromise maybe your performance, certainly probably your recovery, because you're just kind of putting yourself into a deficit during that run that you then have to climb back out of. That can kind of compromise your next day's recovery. So that's where I think the main benefit of fueling, say, an easy long run comes from. It might not improve your performance, again, because you're not really pushing the limit of yourself during that run. So fueling or not, you're probably not going to feel anything major. Maybe you'll get a little bit of a brain or a mental boost. But I think by preventing that glycogen depletion and preventing yourself from getting into that caloric deficit, you are expediting the recovery process. You're going to feel better the next day. And I've certainly experienced that. If I fuel adequately for a 20-mile or more long run, I feel much better the next day versus if I do it fasted, which admittedly, I wouldn't say I ever go for a 20-mile long run now fasted completely, but certainly inadequate fueling. Sometimes I'll do 20 to 40 grams of carbs per hour, which is not adequate enough. But, sometimes I just don't feel like you need it. I think if you're being consistent in training most of the time, eating well all around in general, you're probably okay doing a fasted workout from time to time. That's just my opinion. So moving on now to training and workouts. This is kind of one of the bigger sections here. Get a lot of questions regarding my training. So what does your first 6 weeks of training look like in terms of quality sessions? Are you doing something like 5K work before bridging to lactate threshold? Do you prefer continuous thresholds or interval style workouts? What's your key goal pace workout a few weeks before the race? So this one was referencing or in reference to, I think, a post I just put out about starting my marathon training block for California International Marathon, which is this year, December 7th is when I'm going to be racing that. I think, the first 6 weeks, so let's just say I'm doing a 12-week block, which is kind of typical, at least the 12-week sort of build. The first 6 weeks honestly looks a little bit similar to the final 6 weeks, where I might be doing more sort of tempo and threshold based stuff. In the second 6 weeks or getting closer to race day, I might be doing shorter repeats that are a little bit faster to try to hone my faster than race pace speed. In terms of what I prefer, I definitely prefer continuous threshold style workouts. So a tempo run or, 2-mile intervals or 3-mile intervals versus 800-meter repeats or 1,000-meter repeats or mile repeats. I like all that stuff, but the continuous threshold type stuff just tends to feel better for me. I think it takes a little bit less out of you, and I'm less inclined to push during those versus an interval workout where I might get a little bit more recovery. And obviously, when training for a marathon, I think that kind of stuff is a little bit more beneficial versus, 400-meter repeats, 800-meter repeats. That stuff is still obviously valuable to kind of work on that top end speed, but I definitely prefer the continuous threshold type stuff. And what's my key goal pace workout a few weeks before the race? One workout I really like that I do pretty much, I'll say two workouts that I do almost every single block that I like a lot. One is an 8 to 10 mile tempo run or run at race pace, basically. So it's kind of like a marathon pace simulation workout. So I will do 5-6 mile warm up. I'll do 8 to 10 miles at race pace, and then I'll do 5 to 6 mile cool down for like a long run. That one just gives you a lot of confidence, especially if it feels easy. And during that, I like to sort of simulate the fueling, simulate what shoes I'm going to wear, kind of like a dress rehearsal for the race. The second one is a cut down tempo run where I'll do 4 miles with then recovery after, 3 miles recovery, 2-mile recovery, 1-mile recovery. And then the average pace on each of those gets a little bit quicker as the duration shortens. So the 4-mile will be something like maybe, marathon race pace plus 10 seconds. 3 miles might be marathon race pace. The 2-mile might be marathon race pace minus 10. And then that 1 mile might be, 5K race pace, 10K race pace, something like that. That one's a huge confidence booster. It's a lot of high quality work. You're getting 10 miles total of work there. And I've done that the past 2 marathon training blocks, and I've found that to be very, very beneficial. This next question is about strength training. Oops. Do you use the Strength Log app to log your sessions? Do you follow a specific program or workout, or do you create your own custom ones? To call anything that I'm doing a program would certainly be a bit hyperbolic. The Strength Log app is just this app that you can kind of use to track your strength training sessions. But no, I don't follow a specific program or workout. These days, a lot of my strength training looks like doing body weight stuff, or I actually have a dumbbell now that I got, but stuff like that in the garage. Admittedly, I don't do, I think, enough strength training, but I think I do enough, but I don't do as much as I probably could. But I do feel like doing the stuff that I've done in the past few years has allowed me to build some strength, and I do feel, I've been injury free for the most part. I feel my strength improving, but push-ups, pull-ups, variations on dumbbell exercises, sort of whatever I just feel like doing on that particular day. So I can't really go into much detail on what my strength training program looks like because it's not too detailed or programmatic at all. Something I can certainly work on. What are some of your go-to bike workouts to improve running capabilities? Yeah, again here, with my biking, I'm a little bit less structured than maybe I am with my run workouts. I think that I'm biking, 2 to 3 times per week, and generally, I'm gonna do, like, some type of interval session, but usually those are aerobic intervals, and something I like a lot is, like, a 3 or 4 times 15 or 20 minutes around, like, maybe 80-85% of functional threshold power, or FTP. I find that that session really is just good to kinda help you sit in the quote, unquote, "pain" for a little bit, and really it's a very kind of, like, marathon-ish effort-paced workout. So I find that, I guess, improves my running capabilities, however you wanna put that. But most of the time when I'm on the bike, especially if I'm in a heavy marathon training block, I'm just doing easy cycling because it's kind of serving as like a zone 2 run, or in place of a zone 2 run. The next question here, do you think adding biking to a marathon block comes with downsides? Do you still need to be mindful of overtraining if you stack biking on top of a normal marathon block with proper rest and nutrition? Yeah, totally. I don't think biking is quote unquote free lunch. You can't just do as much as you want, but you can certainly do a little bit more of it without the risks that would accompany more running. But yeah, you have to be mindful of overtraining and realize that adding another bike workout to the week is imposing an additional stress. So I am mindful of that. And, if I up my running volume, my cycling volume will come down a little bit in place of that. So, you certainly do need to be mindful of that. But you can get away with adding a little bit more biking, and it is almost, I hate to say this, but it's almost a little bit of free fitness because you're not getting broken down as much. I mean, for example, yesterday, I did a nice workout in the morning, 15 miles worth of running, and I wanted to go on another run in the afternoon, but decided it might just be better to rest. My legs were feeling a little bit sore, but I hopped on the bike for an hour, probably, about 180, 200 watts of just a ride. And my heart rate never went above 115 or 120. And so I think that, it was more of a recovery session. Obviously, I gained a little bit of fitness there because I was working out, but that almost just had just a tiny little bump, I think, in my overall training stress in the grand scheme of things. Whereas a run, if I went out for 5 or 6 miles, probably would have had a bit more of an impact there. Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on swimming instead of biking for cross training? I used to swim competitively and would much rather swim than bike, but running has absolutely taken over as my sport of choice. Um, I don't really have too much to say there. I hate swimming. So, I don't know. With biking, I could at least see a reason or a way that there's some transference there where, if you bike a lot, there's going to be some transfer over to improvements in running. With swimming, I just don't see the transference as much. I think that it's great for just a full body workout to improve fitness, maybe improve some strength and get that kind of recovery that will come from that water. But if you're looking for a way to cross train, I think swimming is kind of a poor way to cross train as a runner, to be honest. I think biking probably has a little more upside there. Next question, what are your thoughts on biking versus using an elliptical for cross training? Okay, so again, this will be a short answer because I absolutely hate the elliptical even more than I hate swimming. I'd rather take an off day than use the elliptical, I think. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about the elliptical that is just terrible. Treadmills aren't great, but I could do a couple hours on a treadmill, no problem. Yeah, I can't do more than 30 minutes on an elliptical. It feels unnatural. The machines are never smooth, and I just really don't like it at all. But now, biking versus elliptical, I could see a reason why the elliptical would be better than biking because it's really going to simulate the biomechanics of running a little bit more. I think the problem with the elliptical compared to a bike, at least for me, I can certainly achieve a higher power output on the bike than I could during an elliptical. I feel like I'm very limited on an elliptical in terms of the intensity at which I'm going to be able to go. So that one's going to come down to preference. I think that if you're able to simulate the same training load, elliptical is probably better because you're upright, you're using your arms, you're using your legs, similar to running. But I still would prefer the bike. I really just prefer the bike. Last question here. Are the biomechanical benefits different when running on a treadmill versus running on the pavement? Yes. Now, I'm not a biomechanics expert, but if we just think about running on pavement versus running on a treadmill, maybe not the biomechanics of how you're running. I think your form probably changes a bit, but when you're running over ground, you're propelling yourself forward. Whereas if you're on a treadmill, the belt is moving under you. So while you're still running in both cases and your form might work the same, there are definitely differences in how it affects your body because you have a belt moving under you, whereas outside the ground's not moving under you. You have to push yourself forward. So I can't really give, specifics on what's going on there, but there are certainly differences. That's why running at the same pace on a treadmill generally feels easier than it does outside because you have that belt moving under you. All right, so this next bucket of questions is related to injury prevention and recovery. And the first question here is, how are you managing injury prevention with all that training load? Do you incorporate weight training? Um, so yeah, I think this was just in reference to, I think I posted a snapshot of like my weekly training, which generally tends to run somewhere in the range of 12 to 15 hours. And that's combined running and biking. How do I manage injury prevention? That's tough because I don't really do anything special. And that might sound surprising for some people to hear that I don't really do anything special, but I do the things that we know work, give myself adequate recovery time, make sure to not go hard every single day of the week. I have worked on my running form a lot and continue to do so in the past few years. And I think that has had an outsized benefit on not only the decrease in the number of, bone stress injuries that I've experienced, but just the other musculoskeletal related injuries too. I think form plays such a huge role, but so does load management. So don't increase your running volume too much. Don't increase your intensity too much either. Don't increase the combination of the two too quickly. But, working on my form, I think is a huge thing. Doing the strength training that the minimal strength training that I do, I think does help. And, just overall, just staying active. I think being just robust as like a person outside of running can sort of help you perform and be injury free in running. I tend to think that, pro athletes are obviously training very hard, but you almost wonder if there's something to the idea of, well, you're training all day and then it's like you're resting on the couch and you're not really doing much. So your body's designed to do one thing, and that is run in a straight line. And if you do anything outside of that, it's going to be like stressful. So just training your body to like be robust against stuff. I don't know. I don't really have any strategies there, and I do incorporate some weight training, as I mentioned, and I think that helps me, at least maintain some muscle mass and strength to prevent injury. The next question: how do you decide if you can run with pain? I'm 46, training for Berlin, and have had vague pain in my right hip for 3 weeks. It's not getting worse or better. I'm stretching daily and doing strength training 2 to 3 times per week. That one is difficult as well because, in my experience, the last few years, most of my injuries have been bone stress related. And so sometimes those can initially present as, oh, this feels like something muscular. Maybe I just strained a muscle. And so I think that, how do I decide if I can run with it? A pain scale just in your own head is pretty helpful. I mean, at one point in my career, I would run on a pain of a 6 or a 7 or an 8, but at this point, if a pain is approaching a 5 or beyond that, I'm just not going to run. I'm going to shut things down until I figure out what's going on. It really just isn't worth running through pain, especially something like, in this case, you said, vague pain that's lasted for 3 weeks. That could be an indication that, something is really wrong and that you need to go get it checked out. So persistent pain, for if I take a few days off and then the pain comes back, if I can't sort of stretch it away or massage it away, all of these things, you really just have to learn kind of your own, not only your pain tolerance, but like what certain things might mean. But for me, if I have a pain of 4 or 5 or above, and I take a couple days off and the pain returns, or maybe it hurts while running and then it stops when I'm not running, but it's still tolerable, that's something that I might continue to run on. But if I'm running and it hurts when I'm not running and it's a 4 or 5 or above, when I am running, I'm probably just going to take some time off and figure out what's going on. Okay, so next set of questions is all about mental performance and adaptation. And the first question here is, do you have a mental performance conditioning routine? Um, I really don't. Nothing formal, at least. I mean, I use self-talk sometimes during a race or a workout, but I don't do anything really involving mental performance training, at least directly. I think a lot of the mental performance training just comes from what you're doing during workouts. I mean, when you're in a workout, when you're in a long, hard grind of like a long run or a tempo run, you're training your mental performance there by just practicing strategies that you're going to use. Maybe that's dissociating. Maybe that is, zoning in, getting in the flow. So I think that during running, I am practicing mental performance. I don't have any special, like sports psychology stuff that I necessarily work on. Um, Interestingly, something I was thinking about the other day, though, was the idea that I think we should all learn to run alone sometimes. Run clubs are great. The proliferation of run clubs is awesome. But sometimes I often wonder, with most of these run clubs, people are working out with each other every single day, or at least their interval workouts and their long runs are with people. Well, if you're in a race, you might be alone sometimes, or at least you're going to have to deal with the pain alone. And so maybe this is just coming, personally, I do like 95% of my training is alone. So maybe I'm just biased towards that, but I think it's important to be able to not only motivate yourself, but like just be with yourself on these prolonged runs and these hard runs to sort of train yourself to be in that state versus, maybe I'll get some pushback for saying this, but like using other people as a crutch. So I'll leave it at that. Next question here. In recent years, how much of your progress is from getting fitter versus getting better at handling pain? For example, learning how to suffer incident discomfort. Do you think your gains have been more about physical growth or mental adaptation over time? Okay, so I love this question because I have made some performance breakthroughs in the past few years. I've gotten better as a runner, not just in terms of like faster times overall, but I'm more consistent, more robust. I'm having more fun running. just a bunch of things about my running are better than they were when I was, say, in my 20s. I do think that I am objectively fitter, and my times, I think, would reflect that. I think my fitness would reflect that. I think I've become more efficient. I think gains in efficiency have really led to improvements in my performance versus just, say, simply, quote unquote, getting faster, like top end speed. But the better at handling pain and sort of just this learning aspect of running is so interesting because especially if you think of like, say, a half marathon or a marathon or even anything longer than that, the mental game becomes a lot of it. And that just doesn't mean like, oh, I can grit it out and I can go hard. I think a lot of that is just glamorized BS. I think that this whole idea of like you just have to grind through it and get through the hardships, and I don't know. That's not like what it's all about. But handling pain and realizing that you can sit in it and learning the cues from your body. I mean, I like to think about this from a physiological perspective. Um, knowing, okay, I hurt right now, but like, what's my breathing rate? Like, how long can I sit in this at this heart rate? That stuff, learning that will directly lead to improvements in performance. And I think this goes to the concept of this physiological resilience or durability. I think I've become more durable as a runner. Basically, that just means like over time, over the course of a race, like you're declining less. Your physiology is declining less. So becoming more durable is a huge part of, I think, why my performance has improved. And it's a way in which people can improve their performance too without actually getting faster. And so it can kind of explain a lot of the age and experience related improvements in performance. All right, moving on here to heat and environmental training. This should be fun. So, how do you deal with running in the extreme heat of southern summers? Southern summers, so I'm in Texas, Austin, Texas. I'm in my third year of running and still haven't figured it out. Sincerely, a Floridian. Yeah, really, I don't know. Dealing with it sometimes just involves dealing with it, I guess, honestly. I mean, we are nearing the end of the summer here in Texas, but I mean, today I went on my run. I started way too late at 8 o'clock, and I mean, it was probably 85, 90 degrees by the time I finished. And so at some point, dealing with it, yes, is ensuring proper hydration, ensuring you're fueling correctly, dressing appropriately, and starting your workouts early before the sun starts to rise. I think that's one. But second is just like you kind of just deal with it and you have to realize, okay, I'm going to have to adjust my pace. My perceived exertion is going to be a little bit higher. You're just going to have to make modifications in some terms of like your expectations. And so I think that the summer is a great time for base building. Don't focus on like workouts where you're going to be tethered to a particular time. Don't, force yourself into hitting a particular pace. Just you can run hard, but just like base it off of effort and realize like it doesn't mean anything because it's 90% humidity and 85 degrees outside. So manage expectations, realize that it never really gets easier. Yeah, you can heat adapt, you can heat acclimate, but that never makes running in the heat easier. It's always like going to suck and it's always going to be miserable. So sorry, I don't have a better answer there, but um, the next question here, a big point of discussion in cycling, and let's, apply this to running or maybe whatever, any athletic endeavor that we're talking about, is that heat inputs should be limited or eliminated on recovery days because heat is a stressor. Have you been following these discussions? Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point because kind of like with the bike, but especially with something like the sauna or hot baths, two things of which I'm very interested in because I think heat training has massive implications for performance. We also have to realize that these are a stressor. You go and sit in a sauna for 30 to 40 minutes. That's a training stress that you have to take into account. It's not just, again, there's no free lunch. So you have to look at that in the context of your overall training and realize that like this is going to add to my training stress. So what am I going to do to um modify the rest of my training or, make my training work around this session. So I don't think you should eliminate it on recovery days. In fact, perhaps on your recovery day, you substitute a workout for a heat training session. And in fact, that's something that I do all the time. I think that there's a value in complete off days where you're doing nothing. No sauna, no light biking exercise. You're taking an off day. But on a lot of my recovery days, I'll do 30 to 45 minutes in the sauna, hop in the pool for a little bit, and then call it a day. So you're getting a little bit of training in, you're getting a little bit of stress, but you're not, really exercising. I like to use it for that purpose. But yeah, if you have a true recovery day on the calendar and you're going to be doing heat stress, just realize that might not be a true recovery day. Unfortunately, it's hard to gauge the impact, the training load of a sauna session or a heat training session compared to say something like a cycling session or a run session, which can be quantified a little bit easier. But just subjectively, I think you're able to gauge it. Just like, did this heat session take a lot out of me? Like, how should I modify things based on that? The last question here, I see you record sauna workouts. Do you consider this part of your training time? Yeah, so I do. I take my watch and my heart rate monitor in the sauna. Again, because I do consider it sort of part of my training time. Again, I don't, and this is kind of contradicting what I just said in the last question, but I I don't necessarily, I consider it extra working out, and I try not to do it too much, but, I don't really modify my training because 'cause I'm not saunaing. So hopefully that's a correct verb, but it is now, saunaing too much, couple times per week. In fact, this summer, when it's summer in Texas, so between June and August, I rarely use the sauna because if I'm doing 90 minutes to 2 hours of working out in the morning, I'm losing a lot of sweat. And there are days where I'm like, I don't think I could go sit in a sauna right now, nor do I need to. It would just be way too much. So yes, I consider it part of my training time in that way, in terms of if I've already gotten a sufficient heat stress or a sufficient workout, I'm not going to go in the sauna again and just kind of lump that on. So yeah, I log it. I consider it part of my training. I put it in to my week. I factor that in as like an additional session, and you kind of have to as well because it's time. Everybody has kind of limited training time. So if you're doing 30 minutes in the sauna, is that taking the place of something else? So you have to consider that as well. The next bucket of questions here are about health and physiology. Just one question here. Does high training volume ever make you want to stray away from it due to risks like coronary atherosclerosis and atrial fibrillation? I think if there was like one topic I think that I had to just dedicate the rest of my life writing about or looking at, I think it would be this one. I think because one, I'm inherently maybe biased as an endurance athlete. I'm invested in this idea because I like engaging in high volumes of endurance exercise. For those who may be unfamiliar with what this refers to, there's literature out there associating masters athletics. Mainly these cohorts are male, lifelong athletes, masters athletes, particularly runners, sometimes cyclists, um, showing that they have higher levels of coronary artery calcium, so kind of a biomarker of heart disease, atherosclerosis, compared to people engaging in less exercise. So a bit of a paradox there because we know exercise is protective against heart disease. While at super high levels, maybe not. Maybe there's some damaging effects of high level endurance exercise. We know that atrial fibrillation, so the heart arrhythmia, endurance exercise inevitably raises your risk of that. But the atherosclerosis thing is certainly a concern. And again, I think my bias may be coming out here, but I'm just not that convinced yet because I don't think we have data from cohorts that are well controlled enough yet in terms of isolating the impact of lifestyle factors and genetics and family history. All we have is, these 60-year-old guys who took up running at 20 and they've been doing it for a long time at a high level and they have high levels of coronary calcium. I don't know if that really tells me a lot about whether my risk is higher because I'm engaging in endurance exercise. So it's an area of research that I'm constantly keeping my eye on. The short answer to that question would be no. It doesn't make me want to stray away from endurance exercise. I think unless there was a definitive, like, hey, you have heart disease and you need to stop running. At that point, of course, I would probably say, well, I need to modify my lifestyle a little bit. But I just think that, and listen, I'm not doing like Ironman level training. I'm 20 to 30 hours a week. I run a lot and I cycle a lot, but there's certainly people out there doing a lot more exercise than me. And at this point, I've had maybe a couple scenarios in the last 5 years where something kind of wonky with my heart was maybe making me a bit concerned. And I've gotten tons of tests done, actually. Full transparency. I've had multiple echocardiograms, electrocardiograms, scans of my heart done. And thus far, everything has come back negative in terms of not finding anything. And so, at this point, I'm only 32, but I haven't had a coronary artery calcium scan. I'd love to, but at this point, nothing has pointed to, you're really doing some damage to your heart, feel healthy. And I think that when it all comes down to it, if you can, modulate other lifestyle habits, that this endeavor is perfectly heart healthy. So it doesn't make me want to stray away from it. It's an area that I'm constantly, whenever new research comes out on it, I'm reading it, I'm writing about it. And so, something to keep my finger on the pulse of, pun intended there. This next section is all about gear and equipment. Are super trainers more for enjoyment, or is there a benefit to wearing them over a comfortable daily trainer for non-pace target mileage? Yeah, so super trainers, super shoes, I guess we'll just call them generally. This refers to either shoes with these special foams on them and or a carbon plate, a carbon fiber plate. So shoes like the Nike Alpha Fly would fit into that category. Just these super high-tech racing shoes that everybody is wearing these days. Um, they're definitely not just for enjoyment. They do feel good to run in, that is for sure. But I think that there is a benefit, and there could be some detriments too. I'll talk about that. But is there a benefit to wearing them over a comfortable daily trainer if you're not doing, say, an interval workout? I think the answer there is yes, especially if you're doing high mileage, if you are maybe prone to injury, maybe if you're older. One of the incredible benefits of these super shoes lately is just they allow you to train harder and train more. I can run more miles at a faster pace without increasing my injury risk if I'm wearing a super shoe compared to just some regular Christian daily trainer, which still these days are pretty good because of the shoe technology. They're not like these thin, wafer thin racing flats that people used to wear. I really just think that if you can learn to run in them and run in them safely with effective, efficient biomechanics, that they can have massive benefits on actually reducing your injury risk because they reduce the load on your body. They reduce the load on your joints, on your bones, on your muscles. Yes, I don't think you should do all your runs in super shoes, but I think that if you wanted to do 80%, 75, 80% of your weekly runs in super shoes, why not? I don't see a reason not to as long as you can run in them safely and effectively. I think they may allow you to train more and therefore become a better runner. Next question here is, how do you carry water on your runs? This has been a constant battle. And one reason why I like running in the fall, in the winter, is that I can just go out on my run without worrying about carrying water. But it's sort of become a non-negotiable here in Texas, anywhere, I guess, but especially here in Texas in the summer. I just have to carry water if I'm going for 90 minutes or more. Otherwise, my workout is going to suffer. So I've tried multiple things, and unfortunately, I didn't bring any of the gear that I have right now. I bought a couple belts. Nerd Belt is just one of the brands that I've been using. I also have a Nathan belt that sort of stores the water bottle at the small of your back, which I like a lot. The Nerd Belt sort of holds it in these two holsters on the side. Both of those are great. The problem there is kind of you're just limited by the capacity of the water bottle. You can really only carry 20, 24 ounces at a time. So either you're looping back to the house or you're stopping at a water fountain to refill it. But the belts are really nice. If you can find one that doesn't bounce, that sits really nicely on your hips, they make some pretty comfortable ones these days. So that's kind of my main way. And recently I have invested in a running vest, which I actually like. I never thought I'd wear one or that I would need one, but I got a Camelback running vest and it has two little holsters right here for water bottles. It has a nice pack in the back where you can put phone and maybe some gels. And it fits tight. It's pretty lightweight. It doesn't really change my biomechanics when I'm running much. So I've really been digging it. And I'm going to see, if I might just end up wearing this all the time, like even during the fall, just to like carry some stuff around. So we'll see. But the answer there is belt and or running vest. I have a handheld water bottle, a Nathan one, so it kind of has this nice little slip that goes over your hand so you don't actually have to squeeze it and carry it. But the handhelds, I don't know, for some reason it just gets annoying to me and I don't necessarily like them. So I'll do that sometimes, but I just generally don't like to have anything in my hands when I'm on my run. So I have more veered towards the belt and vest route for my water carrying options. I guess the other alternative there would be you could just plan your route with a lot of water stops along the way, but that's kind of a pain in the butt and I don't really like stopping on my runs. So that's why I carry water when I have to. Okay, so next set of questions or question here, I guess, weight management and performance. Do you do any research on nutrition relative to dropping weight while building mileage and speed? I want to lose 30 pounds to improve my power to weight ratio. Wow. Power to weight ratio for a marathon in January while training hard and working full time. Is this possible? Yeah, the weight loss while training is a touchy topic, and If you have weight to lose, of course, I think it can be done more safely. If you think one thinks they have 30 pounds to lose, I think that's a different scenario than a runner who wants to lose 2 to 5 pounds to sort of get down to their race weight, which is a totally different scenario. Here's basically what I say when anybody asks me, how do I lose weight and train at the same time? Because the two are kind of at odds, not in terms of exercising and losing weight. I don't think that's at odds at all. But if you're trying to optimize performance, set a personal best in the marathon, and also lose weight, that's kind of at odds because optimizing performance means fueling correctly and fueling adequately. Losing weight kind of involves, you have to be in a caloric deficit. Simple as that. So my recommendation, kind of two recommendations here. One, if you want to do it simultaneously, do it ever so gradually. So if you want to be diligent about tracking your caloric intake and output, maybe 200 to 500 calorie per day deficit for I don't know, you're losing like half a pound maybe per week, something like that. That's kind of what I would target if you want to lose the weight while really gearing up and training for this marathon. Just very gradual weight loss and really pay attention to your macros. Maybe just really focus on carbs to fuel your performance and then protein to sort of fill the rest of your calories and support your muscle mass and your recovery needs. That would kind of be my recommendation there. But really, generally, what I recommend there is do the weight loss during an off season, a season where you're not training to set a personal best in the marathon, and then peak for your race. And this is generally a recommendation for maybe somebody who doesn't have a ton of weight to lose, but they maybe want to drop 5 to 10 pounds, maybe even less than that. But let's just say 5-ish, 10-ish pounds. I say, okay, take 3 months of an off season where you can kind of just train and you're not really focused on performance and target maybe a steeper caloric deficit. I don't know, 500 calories a day, maybe a pound or two a week. Drop the weight. Then when you get to your weight, go back to caloric maintenance and start to train for performance. That's kind of my benefit there. I think weight loss should occur during the off season because if you're trying to lose weight and you're also trying to get faster at the same time, those things generally, I won't say they can't occur because obviously they can, and especially if you lose 30 pounds, well, you're going to get faster. But you just might not have enough energy because you're being in that caloric deficit to train for the marathon that you eventually want to complete. So yes, it is definitely possible. Just do it safely, do it gradually, I think would be my recommendation there. Okay, last question for this Q&A session. This has been a lot of fun and hopefully you all are enjoying it. I certainly am. Training symptoms is the questions here. Do you ever feel shaky on zone 2 runs despite feeling like you fueled well? This never happens to me when cycling or during high intensity runs, only consistently in zone 2, and I can't figure it out. So this actually, I ended up direct messaging the person who asked this question because for about a month over the summer, I was experiencing this exact same things. I would go out. Well, I guess I'll back up a little bit because what I started doing was, I was training, a little bit more heavily. And I think this was actually in the spring before the Boston Marathon, but I had decided that I wanted to experiment with fueling my workouts. I talked at the beginning of this Q&A about how I don't generally fuel workouts. Well, I wanted to start eating something before my workouts. So I was eating a nutrition bar when I woke up. It was 40 grams of carbohydrates. It was actually a Cadence. Ross Mackey, he started a company called Cadence. They make great electrolytes, great nutrition products. Shout out to Ross. He sent me a bunch of the stuff to try out. And so I was eating these Cadence bars, which are great, 40 grams of carbs. It's like a rice bar. I was eating those pretty close to my run. I was waking up, having my coffee, having the Cadence bar, about 20 to 30 minutes before starting my run. And then I would get 20 minutes into my run and I would start feeling shaky. I would feel shaky. I would feel it's like some jitters and some like tightness in my chest. I felt very anxious. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? I've never felt this before in my life. And it kept happening. And so I was like, okay, I don't know what's wrong. Obviously, it's not because I'm underfueled, because I run fasted a lot and I don't feel like that. So what's going on here? Well, around the same time, I got a continuous glucose monitor or CGM. So I put that on my arm and I used it for about a week before my sweatiness eventually destroyed it, unfortunately. But I used it for about a week, and on 2 to 3 runs, I was exposed to the source of this problem. So what was happening is around the 20-minute mark, my glucose was tanking. It was around, I think, 40 to 60 range, around 20 to 30 minutes in my run, down from about 80. 85 to 90 at the start of the run. And then about after that, about 15 minutes of that happening, it would kind of go back up and normalize. But that I realized was the source of the problem. But then I began to think, why is this happening? Again, I'm not underfueled. And it turns out that it is this phenomenon called reactive hypoglycemia. What was happening and what happened to me is, okay, so I was eating my carbohydrate bar, and this bar is just carbohydrates. It's great for fueling activity. So this isn't against the bar that I was eating, which I think is great. The lesson here is everything's all about timing. So I was eating 40 grams of carbohydrates when I woke up on an empty stomach, so I hadn't eaten anything. Well, that's obviously going to increase, your blood glucose is going to start to rise after you have 40 grams of just straight carbs, no protein, no fat. So glucose rises. Well, when glucose starts to rise, your insulin goes up to bring your blood glucose back down. Well, the problem is I was eating that bar so close to my run that about 20 minutes into my run, that's when my kind of insulin levels from the bar to counteract that glucose rise, my insulin levels were starting to rise to bring my glucose back down to normal. Well, also what happens about 20 minutes or a little bit after, but into the run, when you start exercising, well, what happens? Well, your muscles start taking up blood glucose because you're exercising. So these two things were happening at the same time. My insulin was increasing from the bar. My muscles were taking up glucose, and that just resulted in this massive drop in blood glucose before my liver glycogen could start to output to maintain my blood glucose levels. That typically takes about 15 to 20 minutes before that kind of starts to happen. So what I learned from that is you can fuel before exercise, but I probably should be having this bar either right before I head out for my run, which I don't really like to do, or an hour or more before. And I did start doing that, and that resolved the problem. But what I have actually started to do instead is go into my runs fasted and then take on some type of carbohydrate about 20 to 30 minutes in. And that typically generally leaves me feeling fine. So I don't really do anything beforehand. And if I take something after I'm exercising, after I start, zero problems at all. So that's what I've been doing. That's my strategy to mitigate that. And if anybody is experiencing that same kind of phenomenon, that is probably the reason why. So try altering the timing of your pre-workout meal. That seemed to resolve my problem. As for the question of why it doesn't happen during cycling or high intensity runs, I'm not quite sure what explains that. Because it tends to happen to me regardless. I noticed the same thing when I was cycling, high intensity runs as well. So not sure why it would be specific to the type of exercise you're doing, but could just be something to experiment with. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the Q&A session. This was a lot of fun. I'd love to do a live session soon where I, solicit questions from you all on Substack and then get on live and answer them and then answer some questions in the chat. That's actually a lot more fun to me than recording and just talking to myself in a camera and then posting it. But that's what we did this week. And I got a lot of good questions, a lot on training, a lot on nutrition. So I will keep doing this because I get questions all the time and I really like to, I don't even have to crowdsource them. They just kind of come to me naturally. So hope everyone enjoyed this one. If you have any comments about what you might like to see in future sessions, questions you might like answered, or any feedback on this session, please feel free to leave it in the comments. I hope this was sort of a nice alternative maybe to the Physiology Friday. And next week, we'll return to our regularly scheduled programming with the newsletter. So thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon.